some strange way, I began to be drawn toward Catholic things in a way that's so miraculous and unfounded in anything of my past. For instance, when I went to an out-of-town school, for the first time I was buying things to pictures to put in my little dorm room, and I picked out this picture of Dali's Christ. Now, why? And I was on, this school was mostly Protestant, a sprinkling of Catholics, and they put all the New York Jews into one wing so we could be together, so we wouldn't bother the others, I guess, or something. Or they thought maybe we'd feel at home. And so those Jews were very surprised that I came from a Jewish background, and I had this Dali's Christ hanging on the wall. And as a matter of fact, way before my conversion, there were all these strange things would happen like that. Like, I just refused to remove it. And I didn't even like the picture. So it was very strange that I picked it out. And then again, I went into this museum, and there was Dali's Last Supper, which I don't like either in terms of an artistic rendition at all, but I felt mesmerized by the picture, and I just stood in front of it, almost in a trance for 15 minutes. So I think Jesus was just trying to reach me in any way that he could.
These are probably things that you look back later on, and you kind of saw little places where God was dipping into your life, getting your attention. As an atheist, at what point did you start getting drawn to philosophy? Because I know that became so important to you.
Well, because I was looking for meaning in life, and I couldn't figure out the meaning of life. And since life is pretty tragic, I thought, well, if I study philosophy, these are people seeking truth, I'll find truth. But in fact, since the schools I went to were totally skeptical, unreligious schools, all they taught us was skepticism. They didn't teach us any truth. So by the time I hit graduate school, I hadn't been able to find love either. I was, a kind of searching around in love affairs with different people, hoping to find something exciting in life. But I didn't find it in that way. Either they didn't like me enough or I didn't like them enough. Nothing ever worked out. So by 21, I was ready to just give up on life and commit suicide, because I didn't see any reason why you should live just to suffer. And I wasn't finding truth through philosophy.
I was wondering, your move
that's razor sharp to cut up to pieces anything that anyone else suggests. There's a lot of pride in that. But it doesn't last very long, because if you cut up everything, you have nothing left, right?
I remember when I read your story that this time that you're talking about feeling suicidal, that actually you had isolated yourself, right, from the students in the graduate school. You, instead of living with the dorm, you had actually sought the desire to be isolated. Was there a time you went through that?
Yes.
So that you wouldn't be influenced by the other ideas?
I don't know why I did that exactly, but it pushed me further into despair, living alone. And then started these wonderful miracles, which, I mean, this is many, many years ago. I was 20 when this happened. I'm now 68. But every time I tell the story, I just rejoice in the enormous beauty of God reaching down to me and bringing me into his truth. So it began with watching a television program, and on the program were Dietrich von Hildebrand and Alice Jordan, who later became Mrs. von Hildebrand, Alice von Hildebrand, who many people know from EWTN. And they were talking about truth and beauty and goodness as if these were real. And that's what I was looking for. So I wrote them a letter and said, I've been looking all my life for these things. How can I find these things? And so it happened they lived very near me in New York City, and they introduced me to the whole philosophy department at Fordham University. So I switched from Johns Hopkins, where I was studying, to Fordham to pursue this. And I couldn't believe, well, it was just extraordinary to me, since religious people were supposed to be stupid and weak. that these were the most vital people I had ever met in academe, which isn't famous for vital people. And they were so intelligent, and they could refute skepticism and relativism in a few sentences. And so I was amazed at this, but at the same time, I didn't have a clue how they could believe all these strange myths. And that's when miracles started to happen. I went on an art tour that they were running in the summer in Europe, and it started with looking at the great cathedral of Chartres and this beautiful Gothic cathedral, and just sensing how could something so beautiful be based on nonsense? How could it be? You know, and just sensing something of the sacredness of that. And then different paintings, there was a face of Christ that actually came alive while I was looking at it. And then that same face, that same expression as in the face of Jesus alive, was in the face of Pius XII. And
you had a chance to go actually see them.
Yeah, this was an audience in Rome. So, and then this picture of Mary gave me of Da Vinci. Da Vinci's it's an unfinished picture, very dull looking. It's sepia colored. It wasn't finished. And I just grasped the whole sense of purity looking at her. And I became horrified that he was something beautiful which I could never have. You know, of course, I didn't understand at that point that you can become chaste afterwards, even if you've lost your virginity. You can become a chaste person. So I was so attracted to the beauty of this and these things that happened. But then, being such an intellectual, I couldn't just go on that. So I started then reading these great apologetics books, particularly Chesterton and Newman and C.S. Lewis. Even though C.S. Lewis wasn't a Catholic, many, many people came into the church through him. He was a bridge. He was a bridge because, well, he has this basic point of view, which is what most atheists, if they read the Gospels, would think, well, this Jesus was a great religious sage of some sort. He was a really good man. But what Lewis points out is a good man doesn't go around saying he's God. So he's either a liar, or he's crazy, or he really is God as he says he is.
In fact, I think it was both Screwtape Letters as well as Mere Christianity, I think, were influential you in that part of your journey. You still recommend Mere Christianity? It seems like Mere Christianity is one of the best books for that stage of the journey where you're dealing with the apologetic to an atheist.
Yes, absolutely.
Experience in Europe. At what point did you start catching on that you were being drawn? At this point, you're starting to catch on?
The first miracle, with the first thing of feeling this way about Chartres Cathedral, and after that I read the scripture, the New Testament, for the first time, and I had this dream in which I saw Jesus and Mary at a banquet, and Mary was gesturing to me and said in Hebrew, which I didn't know, but in the dream it was in Hebrew, and she said, "Come sit with us." And then I decided to say the skeptic's prayer, which my godfather taught me, which anyone who's an atheist could say, is, God, if there is a God, save my soul if I have a soul. If I could sincerely do that. I was also affected by a sense of the sacred in the Mass, because the whole von Hildebrand circle are daily communicants, and they got up, that was when you had to fast all night before going to church, so they went to Mass every morning, and I would go with them just because I liked them so much, and I just felt something at those Masses. I didn't know what it was, but I felt there was something.
Were you going through a struggle between the logic of your intellect as well compared to this feeling of the heart that was drawing you in a direction different than where your intellect was? Or you're
Yes,
already...
yes, because to an atheist, for instance, to me, to see someone kneeling was a horrible sight. How could, the whole idea was I am the captain of my own soul, I'm the master of life. How could anyone kneel seemed like a horrible gesture. But I would feel something else. I would feel something going on there at those masses. Thought of Jesus as the truth who is a person. And I didn't think of him as love particularly. I just thought of him as truth. Then later I began to experience through Holy Communion and through all the graces that I got, I began to realize that he has this personal love for each of us. That he's not just a teacher. He loves us so much. I mean, I always think of daily communion that way, that he loves us so much he wants to come right inside us. So how could anything be more important than that? But later my sister and mother converted, and my sister, who is a dancer, converted through beauty. And she didn't read apologetics books, she just listened to great Catholic music. And the beauty of it sort of took her. And my mother was most interested in friendship, and she converted through the many friends she made who were Catholic that began to reach her.
I was thinking that your career then originally was in the direction of more of a skeptical, atheistic, like you said, coming up with all the right answers to be able to cut down anybody who had an idea of, to where this conversion, intellectual conversion as well as heart, then sent you off into a love of philosophy and a use of philosophy for the defense of the faith. Is that right? Were you a Thomist? Is that the direction you ended up in?
A mixture, well, no, I'm a sort of mixture of von Hildebrand's philosophy, which is a Catholic, it's called phenomenology, but that's a long, long word.
Yep.
But it's a more contemporary way of doing philosophy, but it's certainly complementary. I mean, I teach the Thomistic central truths of St. Thomas. I always teach as a philosophy teacher. And then also mixed into that would be a sort of Catholic existential approach.
What did you find as you came, besides the fact just the reality of truth, the reality of God, the reality of Christ? Were there any other Catholic issues and doctrines that were hard for you to accept, or aspects of the Catholic faith that were particularly difficult for you
Well,
to journey in?
The moral teachings were extraordinary to me because I was so immersed in the culture of skepticism and relativism. But I studied them very carefully in ethics, so I came to see the truth of each of these teachings.
The pro-life issues, I mean, would have been a drastic difference from probably where you
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, it was considered that abortion was a great gift to mankind in the circles I moved.
So what your old friends think about your journey?
Well, the most important people in my life became Catholics, including my husband-to-be, who came from an Orthodox background, became an atheist in his youth, but was seeking Christ. And his story is wonderful. Unfortunately, I'm a widow, and you can't have him on the program because his story was amazing.
Did you write his story, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
As a little kid, he lived in the Jewish ghetto like you'd see in Funny Girl, you know, that whole area. And one day he walked out of the Jewish ghetto, found the public library, and started reading from A to Z. And he eventually came upon Jesus, and he loved him as a Jewish figure. See, this is the thing. After becoming a Catholic, I realized how Jewish the Catholic religion is and got more in touch with my own Jewish roots. And so he was trying to find this Jesus, and he thought if he married me, who was a Jew who became a Catholic, he'd find Jesus through me, which eventually he did.